Before you even fully opened your eyes this morning, there's a really good chance you engaged in a morning ritual shared by a billion other people worldwide. Yet very few of us actually stop to think about the incredible journey resting right inside our mugs. Welcome to this Explainer. Today, we're going to trace a story that stretches all the way from ancient African forests to the bustling cafe on your local street corner. We're looking at how a simple drink sparked revolutions, inspired philosophers, and completely transformed global economies.
So how exactly did one wild plant growing in the remote mountains of Africa become one of the most influential discoveries in the history of human civilization? It's a massive story, really. It's about curiosity, it's about global trade, and honestly, it's about the unyielding human desire to just connect with one another. Here is our roadmap for today's Explainer. We'll be covering from legend to reality, the first coffeehouses, fueling the Enlightenment, a global coffee empire, and finally, the future of coffee. Let's get right into it. Section 1. From legend to reality, dancing goats and African highlands. This is where the story truly begins. Now, you might have heard the famous legend of Kaldi. The story goes that Kaldi, an Ethiopian goat herd, noticed his flock basically throwing a pasture rave after eating red cherries from a certain bush, which prompted him to try them himself. It's a fantastic origin story for sure, but it's really important that we separate the oral folklore from the actual archaeological and scientific record. Botanically speaking, what we're actually looking at is Coffea arabica. Long before it was roasted, ground, and brewed into your morning latte, indigenous populations interacted with this species in its natural environment within ancient Ethiopian forests. It wasn't just a casual drink back then. Early communities likely utilized these wild plants in various traditional preparations way before the idea of a modern cup of coffee was ever conceived. But the plant didn't stay a local secret for long. Starting in the Ethiopian highlands around the 9th century, it eventually crossed the Red Sea trade networks. By the 15th century, it found a very specific, practical use in the Sufi monasteries of Yemen. This transition, making its way to the bustling port of Mocha, was really the first major stepping stone to its eventual global domination.
Which brings us to Section 2, the first coffee houses, from monasteries to social networks.
How exactly did a drink used for solitary prayer become the center of global social life? Well, the crucial point is this transition right here. Sufi monks drank it to remain awake during long, grueling hours of prayer. But as the beverage spread into the Ottoman Empire, it created what were essentially the world's very first social networks. Just think about that for a second. A tool for solitary religious devotion was suddenly thrust into the public sphere. It shifted from something you consumed alone in the dark to stay awake, into a beverage you shared in the light of day while engaging with your community.
And these early coffeehouses were entirely unprecedented. If you walked into one in Constantinople, Cairo, Damascus, or Mecca, you wouldn't just find people quietly drinking. You'd step into a vibrant, chaotic hub of poetry readings, heated political debates, business meetings, and intense games of chess. Ideas were spreading like wildfire among people from all walks of life, making these spaces the bustling centers of the Islamic Golden Age.
Let's move on to Section 3, fueling the Enlightenment, the Age of Reason. This is where the bean completely rewires the Western intellectual world. When coffee first arrived in Europe via Venetian trade routes, it was actually met with a lot of suspicion. Legend has it that advisors actually wanted Pope Clement VIII to ban the so-called Muslim drink, but upon tasting it, he reportedly declared it so delicious that it would be a pity to let the infidels have exclusive use of it. With his papal approval, the floodgates absolutely opened, and the beverage swept across the continent, overcoming initial skepticism in places like London, Paris, and Vienna.
These European coffeehouses rapidly democratized knowledge. I absolutely love this concept. In London, they were literally called penny universities. And why? Because for the cost of a single penny, which was the price of a cup of coffee, you could sit in a room filled with brilliant scholars, successful merchants, and famous writers and just listen to the greatest debates of the day. You didn't need to be super wealthy or of noble birth to participate in this incredible exchange of ideas. It's honestly mind-blowing to realize that some of our greatest modern scientific and philosophical foundations were hashed out over cups of coffee. Incredible minds like Isaac Newton, Voltaire, and Benjamin Franklin, the literal architects of the Enlightenment, were formulating their groundbreaking ideas, writing literature, and planning scientific advancements in these exact rooms. Coffee was, quite literally, the fuel of the Age of Reason.
Section 4. A global coffee empire. Trade and the Industrial Revolution. As demand skyrocketed, things started to change on a massive scale.
European demand became absolutely insatiable, and empires raced to cultivate the plant in their colonies. The Dutch brought it to Java, the French to their overseas territories, and it just exploded across Brazil, Colombia, and Central America. This aggressive expansion built colossal global trade networks, transforming coffee into one of the world's most valuable agricultural commodities and altering the economies of these regions forever.
And you can clearly see a chain reaction here. This massive agricultural scale eventually became the essential fuel of the Industrial Revolution. As societies urbanized and grueling clock-driven factory shifts became the norm, workers desperately needed a way to stay alert. Coffee replaced beer as the daytime drink of choice. This endless demand drove mass production innovations like instant coffee, commercial roasting, and eventually the commercial espresso machine.
All of that intense industrialization ultimately leads us to today, where an astonishing 1 billion people start their day with this beverage. 1 billion. From a handful of Sufi monks using it for night prayers to a vital commodity that powers the daily routines of a massive portion of the human race. The sheer scale of this agricultural industry today is truly staggering to comprehend.
Let's look ahead with Section 5, the future of coffee, culture, science, and survival. What's really fascinating is that modern science actually backs up what those early Enlightenment thinkers felt. Caffeine does improve brain function, it boosts alertness, and it contains valuable antioxidants. However, it is super easy to get swept up in internet health myths, so it's absolutely vital we rely on peer-reviewed research and filter out the exaggerated claims that constantly pop up online.
As coffee conquered the globe, every culture made it their own, evolving unique local food pairings alongside distinct preparation methods. In France, you pair it with a buttery croissant. In Italy, it's dipped with crunchy biscotti. In Turkey, it's enjoyed alongside sweet baklava. And in the Netherlands, you rest a stroopwafel on top of your steaming mug to melt the caramel inside. It's a single ingredient that has completely adapted to reflect the culinary soul of almost every nation on Earth.
Today, this massive supply chain relies on heavy hitters like Brazil, Vietnam, Colombia, Ethiopia, and Indonesia. These nations are the absolute backbone of modern consumption. They drive both the massive commercial change you see on every corner and the highly specialized, quality-focused third-wave coffee movement that celebrates the unique flavor profiles of specific, local regions. But it's not all perfectly roasted beans in beautiful latte art. This 1,000-year legacy faces severe threats right now. The coffee Arabica plant is incredibly sensitive to rising temperatures, deforestation, and devastating agricultural diseases like coffee leaf rust. Ensuring fair trade and supporting farmer livelihoods isn't just about good corporate practice anymore. It's about the very survival and sustainability of the entire global coffee ecosystem as we navigate climate change.
When you step back and look at the entire scope of this explainer, you realize that every single cup carries a 1,000-year story of human connection. It has survived initial suspicion, it's fueled massive global trade routes, it powered the minds of history's greatest thinkers, and it's adapted to hundreds of different cultures. It is, without a doubt, a profound symbol of our shared human experience.
So, I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. When you sit down with your mug tomorrow morning, take a second to ask yourself, what centuries of history, resilience, and global trade are hiding right there in your next sip?